It started with a knock, barely audible, desperate, in a scorched Montana flatland where decency had long packed up and left. A nameless barefoot woman stood at the edge of nothing, heavy with child, lighter in hope. Then came a stranger, all silence and resolve, who gave her a name and a chance. What came next wasn't rescue, it was reckoning. And in this dust bowl, miracles wear mud and sweat. If your veins run thick with tales of grit and redemption, this is your campfire. Hit subscribe, and we'll keep the stories coming. Now saddle up. The sun didn't just shine, it punished. Western Montana baked under it, fields turned to cracked plates of earth. The air hung thick, more grit than breeze. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The silence told the story of what they were really here to buy. There were no auction blocks, just boots on dirt and shame in every eye. The crowd circled, not cattle, but a woman. Her name, Evelyn. 7 months gone, dust on her skin, her stare dry and empty. Her sobs were a memory. Beside her, Troy Lasker, a man carved from bad choices and beer sweat, with a smirk that curdled the heat. She works hard, doesn't complain. You get 2 for 1 today, boys, he drawled, nodding to her belly. The bottle in his hand might as well have been a gavel. No one laughed. A drop of sweat crawled down Evelyn's spine. Tell you what, Troy snorted. I'll even toss in the ring. Jerking it off her hand and holding it aloft like it mattered, someone cleared their throat. Another shuffled in the dust. Still no takers. Even scumbags have lines. Pregnant woman? Too complicated. Too real. Troy scowled. Really? Nobody? What's wrong? Scared of being a man? Let's wrap this up. It's boiling. Then, cut through the noise, came a single voice. I'll take her. All heads turned. The crowd split like it had been rehearsed. Out stepped a man from myth, Silas Hart. Oil-streaked flannel, dark hair under a torn hat. The hill mechanic with the mute kid and a dead wife. A ghost no longer. He didn't hesitate. From inside his coat, a canvas pouch. Dropped it. Coins hit wood with a metallic sigh. Troy narrowed his eyes. You serious? That's it. Silas stared him down. It's everything I've got, and it's worth more than watching her stand up there 1 second longer. The crowd murmured, shame, maybe guilt. Troy's mouth opened, but Evelyn was already moving. Down from the stage toward Silas, her breaths shallow like the air had changed weight. Why? She asked, rough-throated. He didn't reach for her, didn't touch her, just nodded. Because no one should be owned, not you, not the child. Her lips shook, but she held herself together. Troy kicked the pouch toward Silas. Take her! Trash belongs with trash. Evelyn recoiled. Silas stayed still. He scooped up the pouch, turned, and walked without a word. Evelyn followed in his wake, barefoot and quiet, into the heat, into the stillness, into a life with no name yet. From behind, a voice shouted, You'll regret that, Hart. He didn't flinch. And for the first time in a long, long while, she didn't look back either. The sun was almost gone by the time they reached the truck resting at the edge of the trees. Silas swung open the passenger side and helped her in. She winced, sore and drained, but said nothing. Inside the cab was quiet again, though not with dread, with something deeper, older, like sorrow on the edge of peace. Silas glanced over as he turned the key. Don't owe me anything, he muttered. Evelyn stared forward. Then we're even. I've got nothing left to owe. He gave a slow nod, and they drove. An hour passed, nothing but gravel and wind. Then, I live up in the hills. It's not much, he added. Food, water, a roof. Evelyn straightened. I can work. I've worked harder than most. Silas shook his head. You're not here to earn your place. You're just free now. She closed her eyes and leaned against the glass. The baby shifted gently, like it sensed the change. Not hope. Not yet. But something soft enough to plant roots in. At the edge of Elk Ridge, a lonely cabin waited, hidden in the trees. No lights, no welcome sign, just weary wood, a sagging tin roof, and the curl of smoke rising from a chimney. Silas pulled the truck to a stop, headlights grazing the old steps. He said nothing. He rarely did. Evelyn held her belly in both arms. She hadn't asked where they were going. She didn't need to. The cabin door creaked open. A small boy stood in the doorway, barefoot, quiet, wrapped in an oversized shirt that nearly swallowed him whole. His dark hair was wild, and his big brown eyes flicked between wonder and wariness. This was Finn Hart, Silas's son, 8 years old. Ever since his mother's sudden passing 3 years ago, he'd barely spoken a word. The silence had sunk its roots deep. Silas stepped out of the truck and circled to Evelyn's side. He opened her door and held out a hand. She hesitated, not from fear, but from the feeling that everything was so delicate, like even breathing too loud might break it. Still, she took his hand, and from the shadows, Finn didn't move, didn't blink. He just watched as this new presence crossed into the hush of their world. Inside the cabin, the air was dim and still. A hearth crouched in the corner, firewood stacked with care. The kitchen was small, just a sink, a stove, and a table meant for two. A patchwork quilt lay across a rocking chair. The scent of pine cleaner and something sweet floated gently through the room. Evelyn paused near the doorway. "I can sleep on the floor," she offered, as if it were routine. "I don't need much." Silas shook his head. "Couch folds out. Sheets are fresh. You'll be more comfortable there." She nodded slowly, hand still pressed to her belly. Silas noticed. "I'll boil water," he said, already heading for the stove. "Tea's in the cabinet if you want." Finn hadn't moved, still standing like a shadow near the threshold. His gaze drifted from father to stranger, unsure. Evelyn turned and smiled gently, something soft, practiced. She taught music to children once, filled rooms with sound. But this boy, he wore silence like a second skin. "You must be Finn," she said quietly. He didn't respond, didn't nod, but he didn't run either. That meant something. Later that night, once the tea went lukewarm and the toast was down to a crust, Evelyn sat on the edge of the pullout. She brushed her fingers over the sheet, old floral print, faded, soft, clean, familiar in a strange way. It had been a long time since warmth didn't feel like something you paid for in fear. Silas handed her a pillow. "Bathroom's down the hall. Water takes its time getting hot." "Thanks," she said. He stood there a beat too long, unsure what to do with his hands, his voice, his presence. Finally, he said it, quiet like a secret. "You're safe here, Evelyn. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, but you can stay as long as you need." She met his eyes, unreadable. "Why?" He hesitated. "Because someone should have done it for my wife." They didn't. That was all she needed. No more questions. Just outside the door, Finn sat with his back to the wall. He'd heard it, not the actual words, but the tone, the silence between them, the sighs. Kids like him, they picked up on everything unspoken, and he'd never heard his dad sound like that before. Exhausted, yes, but open, like he wasn't holding everything inside for once. And Evelyn, she hadn't tried to fill the silence or make him talk. That meant something, too. Maybe she was different. Evelyn didn't sleep much. The baby was active, shifting like it sensed change, like it, too, was searching for safety. She lay on her side, hand on her stomach, watching shadows ripple across the ceiling from the dying firelight. She remembered back there, under that sun, under those eyes, thinking this was the end, that there was no one left to step forward, that the last bit of her dignity was going to be spent on a tank of gas. But then Silas Hart showed up. He didn't look like anyone's idea of a hero, more like a man who carried grief in his bones. It lived in the corners of the house, in the rusted tools out front, in the photo of a woman smiling from another lifetime. Still, he saved her. and unknowingly maybe saved himself too. Morning crept in with the hiss of boiling water. Evelyn sat up slowly, her body aching with the weight of sleep and memory. She walked softly into the kitchen. Finn was already at the table, still in his sleep shirt, quietly sketching something on a small whiteboard. He saw her. He didn't flinch. Instead, he turned the board toward her. A drawing. Simple, childlike. 3 figures, one tall, one small, one round with child. A cabin. Smoke curling like a signal. Her eyes burned. "Is that us?" she asked softly. Finn didn't speak, just nodded. One solid, meaningful nod. That was enough. The light here didn't blare like in cities. It whispered. It climbed slowly through trees, brushed gently against the walls. Evelyn sat on the windowsill with a cracked mug, steam drifting upward like fog searching for home. She hadn't spoken. She didn't need to. The creak of wood told her Silas was awake, pacing, like always. Then lighter footsteps. Finn. He stood in the doorway, clutching his board like a lifeline, marker kept clenched in his teeth. He looked at her, then away, but stayed. "Morning, sweetheart," she said, voice soft, real. He stopped. Her tone didn't ask anything of him. It just was. He scribbled on the board and held it out. "You don't talk like the others." Her lips parted, not in surprise, but understanding. She nodded. "I used to teach music to kids." He tilted his head. "You taught songs?" "I did," she smiled. "Hundreds." He erased, wrote again. "Do you still sing?" Her hand dropped gently to her belly. Maybe she would again. "I haven't in a while," she said with a smile. "But I think it's like riding a bike." She stood up carefully and went to the old cabinet by the fireplace. Silas had once told her his wife used to keep a harmonica there. She found it tucked under a faded tea towel, worn but still good. Finn watched closely, his eyes bright with curiosity. He didn't move as she wiped it with the bottom of her dress and raised it. The first few notes came out like a whisper, not because she forgot, but because it had been so long. Then came a melody, gentle and sweet, a tune from school hallways and soft afternoons, the kind of song that made kids stop to listen, the kind teachers hummed while they worked. Finn clutched his whiteboard, wide-eyed. Still and quiet, even Silas stopped his usual walking. By mid-morning, Evelyn had tidied the table. Her movements had lightness now, not from strength, but from something deeper waking up inside her. Purpose returned, like warmth to cold fingers. Silas came into the kitchen with his toolbox in hand, heading to work outside. He glanced at the harmonica. "Haven't heard that in ages," he said. Evelyn nodded. Felt like the house wanted to hear music again. He paused. Finn liked it. "He hasn't sat that still in weeks." Evelyn's voice was soft. "He's not afraid of quiet. That's something we have in common." Silas looked at her for a moment, then nodded slowly and headed out. She watched him go, the screen door shutting with a soft click. There was something heavy in that man, not just sadness, but guilt, the kind that keeps you walled in. She saw it because she carried it too. Later that afternoon, with clouds spinning lazily overhead, Finn came back with the whiteboard. "What's the baby's name?" he asked. She stilled, one hand over her belly, feeling a soft nudge just beneath her palm. "I don't know yet." Finn frowned and thought. He scribbled quickly. "I think she likes your song." Evelyn chuckled. "She did kick hard when I hit the chorus." He wiped the board again, then carefully wrote one word in bold, neat letters. "Hope." Evelyn froze. The marker squeaked faintly, but he wasn't looking at her. He was watching her belly, like he was waiting for a reply. "Hope," she whispered. "That's a beautiful name." Finn gave a little shrug, pretending it didn't mean much, but his ears gave him away. Evelyn reached over and touched his hand, just the tips of his fingers. "I think she'll love that name, too." It was the first time he didn't pull away. That evening, Silas returned from the woods with grease on his hands and a cut along his arm. Evelyn met him at the door with a damp rag. "You always forget gloves?" she asked, dabbing gently. "Only when I'm fixin' junk that's past its expiration." "Like this old house?" He managed a tired grin. "Yeah, something like that." She hesitated. "Finn named the baby." He stopped. "He talked?" "Not out loud. Wrote it down." "Hope." Silas leaned on the door frame, nodding once. "That's a good name." Evelyn folded the towel, placed it on the table. "Do you mind?" Silas met her gaze, really saw her. "I think," he said, slow and certain, "we could all use a little more of it." That night, Finn sat on the rug with a beat-up puzzle. Evelyn rocked gently in the chair, humming her earlier tune, fingers resting on her belly. Silas sipped coffee by the fire, eyes flicking between them, and something inside him, something rusted shut, shifted. Not loud, not grand, just moving again. In that soft-lit room, wrapped in warmth and sound, something thawed. The first snow fell early, dusting trees and settling quiet into the mountain's grooves. Silas had said the cold was coming, but even he didn't expect it this fast. When Evelyn opened the cabin door that morning, the ground was already layered in white, the sky above a washed-out slate. She stepped onto the porch, pulling Silas's flannel around her, forgotten on the chair the night before, still holding his warmth. It smelled like cedar, old oil, and something quieter, like time itself, faded paper and still air. In the snow, something snagged her attention. A box, small, wrapped in brown paper, tied with twine, sitting square at the bottom step. No prints, no tire marks, no hint of who had been. Just the box, like it had arrived out of nowhere. She scanned the woods, but the trees were silent, frozen in time. Inside, she set the package on the table and undid the twine with steady fingers. Finn came padding in, eyes hazy with sleep, bare feet whispering against the cold floor. He stopped when he saw it. "What's that?" she murmured, more to herself than him. Finn sat and pulled his whiteboard closer. "Mailman doesn't come here," he wrote. Evelyn nodded, unsettled. She opened the box, a folded wool blanket. Underneath, prenatal vitamins, cocoa, herbal tea, and a small bottle of lavender lotion. At the bottom, sealed in a manila envelope, was a single sheet of parchment. No return, no name, just a message, handwritten in looping, careful script. "You are not forgotten. You are not alone. Keep walking toward the light." Emma Evelyn stared, read it again and again. Finn leaned in, reading over her shoulder, his brow wrinkled. He tapped the board. "Who's M?" Evelyn didn't respond. Her fingers traced the words, letting the warmth of them press into her ribs like heat against frost. "I don't know," she whispered. "But they see us." That night when Silas returned from clearing brush, he noticed the blanket first, resting across the back of the couch. Evelyn sat beneath it, crocheting, legs tucked beneath her like she belonged there all along. He tilted his head, eyes catching hers. She nodded gently. "There was a package," she said. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of concern. "No footprints?" "None." He crossed the room, picked up the note resting by the cocoa tin, and read it. His jaw firmed. "Someone playing games?" "It didn't feel like a game." "You sure?" Evelyn walked to him, slow, steady, handing him the bottle of prenatal vitamins. "You think someone who meant harm would give us this?" He held the bottle, looked at it, then at her. "No," he said, "and I don't." That night, Evelyn couldn't find sleep. The fire cast shadow dances on the ceiling as she stared at the folded note on the table. The script, it was elegant, like music written by hand. It reminded her of something tender, a life before everything. Back when classrooms held warmth and piano keys waited patiently and students brought flowers with dirt still clinging to the stems. Before Troy. before bruises hidden beneath fabric, before silence became survival, and now somehow kindness had found her again. Out here in the wild, more packages came: dried mango, almonds, baby socks knit by human hands, a jar of chundala cream with a calming scent, always wrapped the same way, always with a note, poetic, sparse, signed only. M. Silas tried to trace the source once. He rose before the sun and circled the woods in the truck, came back empty, just rabbit tracks and pine needles. Either they fly, he muttered, or they're cleverer than both of us. Evelyn said nothing. She just tucked the notes away into an old recipe tin in the kitchen, folded them gently, like wishes she wasn't ready to speak aloud. One evening, Finn sat beside her, whiteboard in lap. He wrote with careful concentration, tongue slipping out as he worked. Then he turned the board to her. "Do you think M is watching us?" she thought, then smiled. "I think they're seeing us." He wrote again. "I like being seen." She tousled his hair. This time, he didn't pull away. Silas stood at the doorway watching, quiet. He didn't say it, but he could feel it. Something was different. The house had long been hollow, a mausoleum of memory filled with dust and the ghosts of what might have been. But now it vibrated with signs of the living: soft laughter, clinking mugs, the rustle of puzzle pieces and scribbled notes handed over with hope. And Evelyn, she didn't prod at his wounds. She didn't pry. Her presence didn't demand. It simply allowed. Earlier he'd caught her humming, something foreign, soft, but magnetic, as she stirred soup over the stove, swaying like a lullaby. When the fire burned low and the world outside vanished beneath a white hush, Evelyn sat back on the couch and opened her tin of notes. She added a new one. "The world is dark, yes, but there are stars, and some shine brighter when you need them most." She closed the lid with a tenderness reserved for relics. Maybe it was one, because something inside her, where cold had lived too long, felt warmed, seen. The sun no longer lingered. Dusk now entered without permission, without apology. Snow piled hard and fast. Evelyn moved slower, winced more. The baby, Hope, as Finn called her, grew fierce, stronger than Evelyn thought anything inside her had the right to be. That morning, the quiet felt sacred. Silas had gone at first light, helping a neighbor clear a broken tree. Evelyn stood at the kitchen window, mug warming her palms, snow sweeping past like whispers. Behind her, the fire murmured. Finn was nearby, working on a puzzle, the same one as before. Again and again, as if each time made it feel more certain. He kept checking in with his eyes, subtle glances, just to confirm she was still there. Evelyn had become his signal, his lighthouse. Then came a sudden jolt in her belly, sharp enough to make her gasp and nearly drop her mug. Finn's head shot up. Evelyn let out a short laugh, more surprise than joy. Her hand flew to her stomach, fingers spread wide like she was trying to catch a ripple in water. "Oh my God," she whispered, stunned. That was a kick." Finn leapt up, whiteboard abandoned, frozen in front of her like a deer mid-step. Evelyn reached out slowly and took his hand. She placed it on the curve of her belly and held still. The room waited with them. Then another kick. Finn's eyes went wide. His mouth formed a word he didn't say. He looked up at her face filled with awe and something close to fear, like he'd been granted a glimpse into something beyond him. "She's saying hello," Evelyn whispered. "She knows you're close." Finn nodded quickly and ran to grab his board. When he turned it around, it read, "I think she likes me." Evelyn laughed, her voice breaking, wiping away a single tear. "She's already lucky," she said. That day, Finn became her shadow. He helped slice vegetables, awkward but proud. He set the table with precision, tiny fingers adjusting every fork. When Silas came back, face red with cold,
The house was full, not just of heat, but of something stronger. Finn greeted him without a word, just grabbed his hand and let him in. He kicked. He wrote once Silas had settled. She? Silas asked. Finn nodded with quiet certainty. She, Evelyn echoed, smiling. And strong, too. Silas smiled back, his version softer, like a candle flickering behind thick glass. Well, he murmured, guess it's official. She's part of the household. That evening, Evelyn sat in the rocking chair beside the fire, a blanket over her knees and the harmonica resting within reach. She hummed again, not the tune from earlier, but something new, wordless, intimate. It wrapped around the room like a gentle breeze. Finn was on the floor with a fresh notebook Evelyn had found in one of the care boxes. He wasn't drawing or writing, just flipping through the pages, listening. Silas sat across from Evelyn, firelight dancing in his eyes. You really going to name her Hope? He asked softly. Evelyn paused her rocking, the chair creaking gently. If she makes it? Silas began, then added firmly, she will. The words tumbled out quicker than he intended, but they landed with weight. Evelyn smiled, not at his certainty, but because he offered it at all. Hope, he repeated. Fitting. She kicked today, Evelyn said. Not just a flutter. Kicked like she meant it? Silas nodded, eyes on the fire. Sounds like someone I know. She tilted her head. You? He let out a dry laugh. Number Finn. She glanced toward the boy, now asleep on the rug, head resting on the notebook. Yeah, she whispered. He's braver than most grown-ups I've met. Silas leaned in, rubbing his hands together. Didn't think he'd warm up to you? He usually doesn't. Not since... He trailed off. Evelyn didn't push. She'd learned when to let silence speak. I didn't think I'd open up to anyone again either, she said softly. Silas looked over, something shifting in his expression. Seems we're all doing things we didn't plan. Later that night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. The baby was restless, and so was her mind. She slipped out of bed, wrapped herself in a shawl, and stepped onto the porch. The snow had stopped. Moonlight bathed the clearing, turning the world into silver. Her tea steamed in the cold. Everything was still. She remembered what the nurse had said months ago, right before Troy yanked her out of the clinic mid-appointment. Strong babies kick early. They fight. Back then it felt like false hope. Now it felt like truth. The door creaked open behind her. Silas stood at the threshold, arms crossed against the chill, his expression unsurprised. She's moving again? He asked. Evelyn nodded, her smile small but sure, like she's trying to punch her way into the world. He leaned against the porch post beside her. Can't blame her, he muttered. World's rough, but this place, it's starting to feel like something. She looked at him. Like home. He paused, then nodded. Yeah, something like that. The knock came just before sunset. 3 crisp raps on the cabin door. No sound of tires, no footprints crunching snow. Just that knock. Dry, deliberate, like it knew what it wanted. Evelyn froze at the stove. Her hand clenched around the spoon until her knuckles went pale. The baby stilled inside her, tense, quiet. Like she knew too. Silas was still in the shed, wrestling with the busted snowblower. Finn was at the table, legs swinging while he drew. The knock came again, slower this time, heavier. Evelyn wiped her hands, heart pounding. She crossed to the door, cracked it open, and there he was, Troy. Same messy beard, same dead eyes, same smile that used to make her skin crawl. Evening, sweetheart. He spoke slowly, like this was a casual visit, like he hadn't tried to sell her body to strangers for a quick payday. Evelyn stepped out quickly, closing the door halfway behind her, hiding Finn from view. You need to leave, she said. Her voice carried steel, quiet but sharpened. Troy gave a dry laugh. That any way to say hello to your husband?
You stopped being that the moment you put a number on my head. His eyes fell to her belly, lingered. Getting comfortable, are we? She stayed still. This isn't a place for you. His expression twisted. You think some washed-up mechanic can give you what you need, what that child needs? Finn's head appeared behind her, silent. Troy spotted him. And who's this? Evelyn blocked him again. He's not your concern. Silas know you're playing family with another man's wife? It stung. It shouldn't have. On paper, they were done. In spirit, they never began. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Troy, she said evenly. And you won't get near this child. His tone turned darker. You think I can't reclaim what's mine? Then you need to leave now. Silas, a few steps away, jacket undone, gloves still slick with oil, but his eyes clear, certain. Troy turned. Well, well, the lumberjack speaks. Silas didn't move. Not a threat. A fact. Troy edged forward. You gonna make me? Silas didn't flinch. Number, but I'm not alone. He nodded to the tree line. Troy looked. A light flickered deep in the woods, and he hesitated. Then a flicker in the woods. Silas had tipped off a few neighbors after that first package came, not because he feared what might happen, but because he knew some shadows always return. You make a move, Silas warned, voice flat and lethal, and you won't leave these woods. Troy stared at him, unblinking, then spat in the snow and backed away. This ain't over. No, Silas replied, steady as stone. It is. And just like that, Troy vanished into the trees. Snow crunched under his boots. Angry, retreating. Inside, Evelyn collapsed into a chair, shaking. Finn placed a small hand on her shoulder. I didn't think he'd come back, she whispered. Silas moved to the stove, poured water into the kettle. They always do, he murmured, but so do we. And we come back stronger. He knelt beside her, warm hands over hers. You okay? Evelyn looked at him, really looked, and for the first time trusted the truth behind his voice. I think I will be. Later, wrapped in a quilt, Evelyn sat on the porch beneath a sky bruised with night. The baby kicked restlessly inside her. Her heart matched its rhythm, but she didn't cry. There was something new rising in her now, not fear's end. Courage's beginning. Silas joined her with 2 steaming mugs. He's gone, he said softly. For now. He passed her a cup and sat down beside her. And he's not coming back, ever. She nodded. After a pause, she said, You didn't have to do that, but you did. Silas studied his hands. I've messed up before. Wasn't there when it counted. For your wife? She asked gently. He nodded once. I thought I had more time. She was sick, and I thought if I just kept working, kept fixing, it would be enough. He paused. I was wrong. I missed the things that mattered. Evelyn reached over, fingers brushing his. You didn't miss this. He looked at her. And the silence that followed wasn't hollow. It was full of everything they hadn't said, but somehow already knew. Inside, Finn lay fast asleep on the couch, Hope's name stitched into the blanket tucked under his chin. The cabin no longer felt like just timber and nails. It pulsed with the weight of something new, harder, deeper, a rebirth blooming from broken places. Evelyn touched her belly, her voice a hush against the storm's coming roar. You're safe now, little one. This house chose kindness. The storm didn't creep in. It crashed. No gentle flurry, just winter on a warpath. It twisted through the pines like ghosts, whispering warnings. By nightfall, the wind screamed like a siren. Snow battered the windows in chaotic flares. Inside, the fire fought back, but cold fingers still slipped through every crack. At the kitchen sink, Evelyn braced herself. The first pain had struck 2 hours ago, small, sharp. Then came another, and now only 10 minutes apart. She didn't say a word, didn't want to panic. Finn nestled with his notebook by the fire. didn't want to call Silas away from his work, reinforcing the shed, didn't even want to admit it to herself. This was happening. Hope was on her way. Another contraction hit hard. Evelyn dropped the dishcloth, grabbing the table, a groan escaping her lips. Finn looked up, alarmed. "Evelyn?" His voice was barely louder than the wind. She turned, offered a trembling smile. "It's okay, sweetheart. She's just excited to meet us." Without hesitation, Finn bolted for the door, threw it open to a white wall of fury, and shouted, "Dad!" Silas stormed in minutes later, soaked and wind-bitten. One look told him everything. Evelyn was pale, breathless, gripping the table like a lifeline. "How close are they?" he asked. 8 minutes. Maybe 7. Another wince. He nodded, already moving. Calm. Ready. "Finn, gather every clean towel, then grab the first aid kit," Silas said. Finn didn't hesitate. He was already moving. Evelyn's voice quivered. "The hospital's 30 minutes away." "I know. And the roads? They're buried in snow." "I know." Silas helped her toward the pull-out bed near the fire, the only warm refuge. "I don't want to face this alone." "You won't." The next hour was a blur. Contractions, steaming towels, Evelyn's knuckles whitening as she gripped the bed frame. Silas worked steadily, saying, "Just enough. You're stronger than you think." Fear crept in, not the pain, but the fear of losing hope, losing herself. Then a soft voice from across the room. "I'm here." Evelyn turned. There was Finn kneeling beside her, hand in hers, notebook forgotten. 2 words, the first in months. "I'm here." Her tears came then, not pain, but something deeper. Hope. At 2:11 a.m., beneath the storm-beaten roof, hope arrived. Red-faced, loud, alive. Silas wrapped her in a towel, hands gentler than ever. Evelyn held the baby close, weeping softly. "I've got you now." Finn climbed beside them, resting his head on Evelyn's shoulder just above the baby. Silas sank back, releasing a breath held too long. For the first time since loss, the world shifted, not back, but forward. When the storm died to a whisper, Evelyn rested, hope asleep in her arms. Silas sat nearby, warming his fingers over the fading fire. "She's got lungs," he said softly. Evelyn smiled, eyes closed. "She's got fire." They sat quietly, the silence full of unsaid things. Then she spoke, voice low and heavy with feeling. "You saved us." He shook his head. You saved me." She opened her eyes. "Before you came," he said, "I was just surviving, working, keeping my son alive, but not really living." He looked at her, the woman who had stepped into his shattered life and built something whole. "I didn't know what I'd lost until you reminded me what was possible." Evelyn reached for his hand. "You gave me a place to be more than a victim, a home to bring her into." Fingers linked, they marveled in quiet awe at the new life between them. That morning, as dawn broke with soft blue light beyond the trees, a gentle knock came at the door. Silas tensed, opened it, but no one was there. Only a basket wrapped in red flannel. Inside, a hand-stitched baby blanket, a bunch of fresh oranges, and a card, in the same elegant handwriting as before. "A storm always clears. What survives becomes stronger. Welcome, little hope." MC Silas looked into the forest again. No tracks, just silence and peace. He brought the basket inside and set it on the table. Evelyn opened her eyes, saw the card and flannel, and smiled. "Always," Silas said softly. Deep inside the cabin walls, where storms had once roared and hearts had broken, something had changed forever. A baby was born, a family was made, and hope, true hope, had found a way to stay. The storm passed but left more than fallen branches and icy trails. It left stillness, as if the mountain itself paused to witness the birth inside the cabin. Evelyn lay with hope against her chest, the baby's mouth opening and closing in quiet dreams. Her cheeks still glowed softly from the firelight, and her breathing had found a new peaceful rhythm, steady, calm, resting and belonging. Finn stayed close, carefully drawing pictures in his notebook. The baby's first cry, her tiny hand, the firelight, the storm outside. Silas moved around the cabin with a quiet weight to his steps. Everything he did was softer now, as if the house had been changed by what had happened inside, like it deserved a quiet reverence. But out in the world, doubt still lingered. Word traveled faster than Silas expected. 2 days after the storm, the mail truck arrived, not with letters but with whispers, that Evelyn had come to live here, that she had given birth, and that trouble was close behind. By late afternoon, visitors appeared. First was Mr. Crowley, the feed store owner from town, standing awkwardly on the porch, hat in hand, unsure whether to knock or turn around. Silas opened the door before he could decide. Crowley shifted nervously. "Heard some things. Thought I'd come see." Silas said nothing, waiting. Crowley cleared his throat. "They say you took in a woman who was sold, that she's got a baby and she's not your wife." Silas's eyes narrowed slightly, but his voice was calm. "That's all true." Crowley blinked in surprise. "You don't deny it?" "Why would I?" Silas answered. "Want to know what else is true?" Crowley nodded. "She's brave. She saved my boy's voice and brought a little girl into this world when most men would have left her to suffer. Not once has she asked for more than a warm place to stand." Crowley looked down, thumb tracing the rim of his hat. "People are talking, Silas. Saying it ain't right." Silas leaned against the doorframe, voice steady. "Let them talk. I'd rather stand beside someone the world throws away than stand with the world that does the throwing." A quiet pause filled the air. Crowley nodded, then paused before leaving. "Brought diapers," he said low, slipping a small plastic bag into Silas's hands. "Granddaughter dropped them off this morning. Said to bring them here." Silas accepted it with a nod. "Thank you." By the third day, the quiet kindness swelled. A post office woman left fresh bread. The carpenter's wife brought hand-me-downs from her twins. An elderly woman from the church, usually silent, dropped off a knit cap with Hope's name stitched on, like a silent blessing. Some came bearing goodwill. Others carried questions. A few arrived with judgment. One arrived with fire. Just after dusk, the knock came again. Hard, urgent. Silas opened the door to a stranger, burly, red-faced, smelling of gasoline and stale beer. "You Silas Hart?" the man demanded. "That's me. That woman. You're keeping?" Troubled. "Everyone knows. You letting her nest here will cost you." Silas folded his arms. "You've said your piece. Now go." The man held his ground. "Think she can change? They don't. She's someone else's mess. Don't make it yours." Silas stepped forward, voice firm. "You're standing on my porch talking about a woman who gave birth in a blizzard and never asked for pity. Think carefully about who the real mess is here." The man's glare was sharp. "You'll regret this." Silas replied, "Then I'll regret it standing tall, not begging." The man spat, turned, and stomped off into the night. 10 minutes later, smoke curled from the front fence post. Silas raced outside, smothering the flames with a wet blanket. A warning, not an attack. Inside, Evelyn stood in the doorway. No tears, no questions, just, "I won't be the reason this place burns." Silas met her steady gaze, breath heavy. "You're not the reason. You're why it's alive." That night, the three of them sat together in silence. Evelyn held Hope close. Finn stayed near, watchful. Silas cradled a black coffee, eyes locked on the fire's dance. The cabin felt changed, no longer confined or fearful, but bold, ready. Evelyn glanced up over the baby blanket. "Why do they hate so fast?" Silas's voice was quiet, steady, because it's easier than understanding. Easier than admitting they walked away when they should have helped. She nodded slowly. "We can't hide forever." "I know," Silas replied, "but we can't leave either." He looked at her, really looked. "You're not going anywhere." A long silence, then Evelyn smiled, not because everything was safe, but because someone had finally said she could just stay. The next morning, neighbors gathered near the cabin, 5 or 6 standing around a camp stove someone dragged in on a sled. No torches, no signs, just coffee, quiet, and those ready to stop pretending neutrality was kindness. When Silas opened the door, a tall rancher with gray braids and leather gloves handed him canned goods. She met his eyes and said simply, "We stand with the baby." Silas smiled. "Then come on in." That spring, the snow melted slowly, reluctant to release what had been buried. But the thaw came, ice turning to rivulets, dead branches to tiny buds. The mountain shed its white armor, revealing earth and tentative green shoots. Inside, life bloomed. Hope was nearly 3 months old. She had her mother's chin, her father's nose, or so Evelyn joked, and Finn's eyes, not in color but in depth, how she watched the world as if she already knew it could be both cruel and beautiful. She rarely cried. When she did, it wasn't a panic scream, but a soft wail, reminding them she was still here, watching, listening. Finn, once so silent the walls seemed to absorb every sound, had found his voice again, not always, not in crowded rooms or with strangers, but at home, in the tender hush of evening or the first golden morning light. He spoke softly, carefully, like someone who'd learned to treasure each word as if it were a rare coin.
It began with reading. Evelyn sat on the couch, Hope cradled in one arm, a picture book in the other. Finn sat close, listening at first, then mouthing the words, then reading aloud. The moment he read an entire page on his own, Silas had to leave the room, not from lack of pride, but because something in his chest clenched so tight he could barely breathe. That night, Silas stood on the porch, hands shoved deep in pockets, eyes fixed on the stars. Evelyn came out beside him, swaying slightly from rocking Hope to sleep. He read aloud, she whispered. Silas murmured, "I heard." She looked at him. "You okay?" He nodded, eyes shining. "I didn't know if I'd ever hear it again." Evelyn placed a hand gently on his arm. "You gave him more than your name. You gave him silence that never judged, and now he's choosing to fill it." Silas swallowed hard. "That's your doing." She smiled. "No, it's Love's doing. We just made space." Later, the school teacher, Ms. Delaney, came with an invitation, a small, informal spring talent gathering meant to bring the community together after a harsh winter. "We're asking kids to read, sing, or share something," she explained. "Only if they want. Finn doesn't have to." Evelyn thanked her, saying nothing definite. When Finn read the invitation later that evening, uncertainty flickered across his face. "You don't have to," Silas said right away, but Evelyn touched Finn's shoulder softly. "Only if you want to." He stared at the paper once more. "Can Hope come?" His voice was so rare, so precious, both Silas and Evelyn paused before nodding. "She wouldn't miss it." Evelyn smiled warmly. The evening arrived softly, like a breeze slipping through an open door. The town hall was glowing with white string lights, filled with the scent of cinnamon and worn pine floors. Finn sat near the front, knees bouncing nervously, clutching his notebook to his chest. Hope rested calmly in Evelyn's arms, wearing a tiny floral bonnet gifted by a neighbor. The room buzzed with the sound of folding chairs and hushed laughter. When Finn's name was called, he hesitated just a moment before standing. His steps were slow, deliberate. A hush fell over the crowd as he stood beside the microphone. He opened his notebook and began to read. His voice wasn't loud, but steady and clear. "This is a story about a house in the woods, a house that was quiet, a house that hurt. Then a woman came with a baby inside her. She brought singing soup
and a name. The baby was born during a storm. Her name is Hope. This is a story about my family. It is not broken. It is ours." When he finished, no one clapped at once. They couldn't. Most were crying. Back home, Finn crawled into bed without a reminder. Hope was already asleep in her crib. Evelyn stood at the sink drying the last dishes. Silas sat at the table, eyes fixed on the lamp, still hearing his son's voice in the quiet air. When Evelyn turned, she saw it. Silas's shoulders softened, years of pain melting away all at once. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded, then shook his head. "I keep thinking this isn't real." Evelyn moved closer. "What part?" He looked at her. "All of it. That I spoke, that I stood there, that I said ours." She pulled out a chair and sat next to him. "You didn't rescue us, Silas. You just made room. You let something grow that shouldn't have survived out here. That kind of love," he said, voice raw, "doesn't look dramatic. It looks like this." He turned toward her, voice trembling. "I've spent so long afraid I'd fail him again." "You didn't," she whispered. "You gave him what no one else could. You stayed." A silence fell, heavy and complete, because no words were needed. Silas reached out, took Evelyn's hand for the first time, not out of need, but choice. Rough, warm, and steady, her grip held on, and with it, peace finally settled. Outside, the wind whispered through bending branches. Inside, the cabin glowed, not from flame or light, but from something far more lasting, the returned voice, the love that remained. The summer sun rose slow and golden over Elk Ridge, casting a warm haze on the gravel road winding to the cabin. Wildflowers, purple lupine, yellow and orange collen, bloomed alongside. The mountains, once frost-clad, now stood proud and green. Hope babbled in her crib. Finn spread jam with surgical precision. Evelyn hummed, washing dishes, braid loose. Silas fixed a screen door hinge. Then it broke, the sound of tires on gravel. Slow, heavy, steady. Finn pressed his nose to the window. A car, a big one. Silas stepped out, squinting into the sun. A midnight blue Rolls-Royce Phantom rolled up the road, shining like a polished memory. Not a car for these hills. Old money legacy and power in its silence. Evelyn whispered, "That's not local." Silas shook his head. "Definitely not." The engine stopped just before the porch. For a moment the world held its breath. Then, with a soft click, the door opened. A woman emerged, tall, silver-haired, draped in a tailored linen coat, the creamy color of morning light. Her heels made crisp crunches on the gravel, but every inch of her spoke of grace, of power restrained. No handbag, just a slim envelope in one hand and gloves in the other. Her voice was low, rich, like a cello ringing in a vast, empty church. "Silas Hart?" she asked. He stepped forward cautiously. "Yes, ma'am. And you must be Evelyn." Evelyn's heart hammered. The woman's expression softened. "I've come to the right place." They didn't hesitate to invite her in. "You don't leave a woman like that standing on your porch." She moved through the cabin like a haunting melody, touching the fireplace mantel, Finn's notebooks, the crib by the sofa. When Hope let out a soft squeal, the woman turned as if hearing a song she'd waited her whole life to sing. "She's beautiful," she said. Evelyn smiled nervously. "She's everything." The woman's eyes flicked between Silas and Evelyn. "I owe you an explanation." Silas lowered himself into a chair. "You're M?" It wasn't a question. The woman nodded. "Margot Hale. I run a quiet foundation in Boston. No press, no websites, just a shadow network helping women escape horrors hidden in plain sight." She placed the envelope on the table, holding back. 3 months ago, one of our agents tipped me off. A woman being auctioned like livestock. The tip wasn't much. No names, no address, just a blurry photo. A man handing over a canvas pouch. A woman so pregnant she could barely stand. Evelyn's hand covered her mouth. Margot nodded toward Silas. That man stood out, not just because he gave all he had, but because he never treated her like a burden. He looked at her like she mattered. Silas didn't say a word. Margot smiled gently. We kept watch from afar, sent supplies, just enough to keep you afloat, but not enough to scare you. We don't interfere, but we never walk away. Finn was watching closely now. Margot turned to him warmly. You were the first to reach out when you drew that picture and left it in the blanket we sent. My assistant cried, seeing it. Finn blushed and looked down. Finally, Silas spoke. Why now? After all this time? Margot's face grew serious. Because I don't just invest in rescue. I invest in rebirth. Something rare is happening here. She tapped the envelope. This grant is inside, non-taxable, untraceable, enough to build, grow, or not. No pressure. Evelyn stared. Margot held her gaze. Because you built something beautiful from something brutal, not with money, but with kindness, listening, and staying. Most people run when it gets hard. You stayed. Her eyes moved to Silas. And you, Mr. Hart, showed your son the most important thing, how to speak without raising his voice. Silas cleared his throat. I never planned any of this. No one does, Margot said softly. Maybe that's proof it's real. An hour later, after tea, photos of hope and a promise from Finn to send more drawings, Margot stood at the door. Coat buttoned, gloves in hand. Evelyn hesitated. Will we see you again? Margot smiled. You won't need to. Then, after a pause, but I hope you will. She turned to Silas. Keep the light on, Mr. Hart. There are more out there than you know. He nodded. We will. Margot stepped off the porch, her heels clicking on the gravel once again before she disappeared behind the door of the Rolls-Royce. The engine rumbled, then rolled quietly down the path like fresh snow. That evening, Evelyn found Silas on the porch, holding the unopened envelope. He didn't say a word when she sat beside him. Together, they watched the sky shift from gold to navy, the moon rising slowly over the ridge. Finally, Evelyn asked, Are you going to open it? Maybe tomorrow, he said. She rested her head on his shoulder. You know, she said softly, some miracles come in plain wrapping. He smiled. Behind them, Hope stirred gently in her crib while Finn sat at the table, drawing a new page in his notebook. At the top, he wrote, Today someone who helped us became real, but kindness was always real. A year passed quietly, without fanfare or fireworks, but in ordinary moments that felt miraculous. Hope learned to sit, crawl, and walk with a bounce that defied gravity. Finn grew taller and more confident, his voice becoming part of the house's soundtrack. Evelyn laughed again, this time with the joy of someone healed who's found her place and claims it. Silas began to live, not just survive. He planted wildflowers around the cabin, taught Finn to repair a radio, and built a rocking chair with his own hands. Not because they needed it, but because some things are worth making just to hold what you love. One summer afternoon, Evelyn stood barefoot on the porch, Hope in her arms, watching clouds drift above Elk Ridge like stories retold. The porch was their heart, where meals were shared, where Hope took her first steps, where Finn read aloud, and where Evelyn stitched small things for the women who came more often, not for help, but for company. There are more out there than you realize, he nodded softly. We will. Margot stepped off the porch, her heels clicking once on the gravel before she disappeared behind the door of the Rolls-Royce. The engine hummed quietly, sliding down the path like a gentle snowfall. That evening, Evelyn found Silas sitting on the porch, the unopened envelope resting heavy in his hands. He didn't say anything when she sat beside him. Together they watched the sky fade from gold to deep navy, the moon rising slowly over the ridge. At last, Evelyn asked, Are you going to open it? Maybe tomorrow, he said quietly. She rested her head on his shoulder. You know, she whispered. Some miracles come wrapped in plain paper. He smiled softly. Behind them, Hope stirred gently in her crib while Finn sat at the table, carefully sketching a new page for his notebook. At the top, he wrote, "Today, someone who helped us became real, but kindness was always real." A year passed quietly, without fanfare, but in moments, ordinary, miraculous moments. Hope learned to sit, crawl, and walk with a bounce that defied gravity. Finn grew taller, his voice becoming part of the house's soul. Evelyn laughed again, a full, joyful laugh of someone who had found her place and claimed it. Silas began to live, not just survive. He planted wildflowers around the cabin, taught Finn to fix a radio, and built a rocking chair with his own hands. Not because they needed it, but because some things are made simply to hold what you love. One warm summer afternoon, Evelyn stood barefoot on the porch, Hope cradled close, watching clouds drift above Elk Ridge like stories retold. The porch was their heart, and where meals were shared, where Hope took her first steps, where Finn read aloud, and where Evelyn stitched little gifts for local women who came more and more, not for help, but for company. Silas came out with 2 mugs and gave one to her. He kissed Hope on the head and leaned against the porch post, eyes on the sky. "She's growing fast," he said, starting to say real words. "She was born ready," he added with a small smile. They watched Hope point to the trees and shout, "Bee!" There wasn't a bee nearby, but it didn't matter. The joy in her voice filled the cabin like a song. As the sun set low, the family gathered on the porch for dinner. Finn had baked cornbread with Evelyn, a little crooked but full of pride. Hope nodded happily while Silas sliced vegetables from the garden they planted that spring. Everything felt earned. Peace doesn't come with fanfare. It shows up in small hands reaching for yours, in the quiet breath beside you, knowing you chose each other again that morning and will again tomorrow. After dinner, Silas lit the porch lantern. Its warm light spilled across the steps, lighting the wildflowers dancing in the breeze. It was the same lantern, left cold for years, now glowing every night, not just for them, but for anyone who might need light in the dark. As twilight fell, Evelyn rested her head on Silas's shoulder. Hope slept in her lap, soft and warm. Finn sat nearby, cross-legged, drawing in his worn notebook. He showed them the picture, the porch, the rocking chair, Hope asleep in Evelyn's arms, Silas nearby, Finn at their feet and above, stars twinkling in the night sky. At the top, Finn wrote, "This is our porch. It used to be dark. Now it's full of light." Evelyn reached for his hand. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." Silas looked at Finn. "You're going to write books someday." Finn grinned. "I think I already did." They laughed softly. Not a loud laugh, but one that comes from hearts broken and healed in the same place. Night deepened as a breeze swept through, carrying pine's sharp scent and something softer, lilacs, from the bush Silas planted by Hope's window. Suddenly, Evelyn's hand slipped into her apron and pulled out a folded letter. "I've been saving this," she whispered, revealing it hidden in Hope's first onesie. "I think it's from Margot." She unfolded the paper carefully, smoothing out the creases. Elegant handwriting curved across the page. "A house is built with wood and nails. A home is built with time and tenderness. You've made a home. Keep your porch light on. Someone else is still searching." They sat in the stillness that followed, the note's weight folding into the night air. Morning came and the porch light was still burning, not by accident, but because you never know who's walking a dark road, hoping for a flicker of light. 1 year later, the porch had transformed. 2 rocking chairs side by side, a second flower bed blooming, and a railing marked by painted handprints, Finn's proud handiwork. He'd made hope add hers, even if it was just a splash of purple paint. Letters piled in the mailbox, neighbors and strangers sending notes filled with the same message. I heard what you did. I thought there was no place for someone like me. Now I believe there is. They folded each letter and stored them in a tin where Evelyn had once kept Margot's secret notes. Now a label in Finn's bold handwriting read, Miracles Daily. That autumn, one final letter arrived, a short note in familiar script. You once needed a miracle. Now you are one. Don't forget. M. Evelyn read it aloud, placing it gently with the others. She glanced at Silas, bouncing hope on his hip, while Finn read aloud from a fresh book. Do you really think we're miracles? She asked. Silas tilted his head. Miracles? He looked around their porch at the family forged from firewood, forgiveness, and the hard choice to stay. Then a knowing smile curved his lips, the kind that holds all the cost and triumph of the journey. Yes, he said, we are. Sometimes the quietest acts echo as the loudest miracles. If this story touched you, share where you're watching from. Let's build a community that stretches across stories and miles. For more stories like this, reminders that goodness still exists, subscribe anytime, no pressure, just a light left on in case you want to return. Thank you for spending part of your day here. We're so glad you stayed.